Following the great Viking invasions of England in the 9th century, many of the former Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were conquered, swept aside by the great heathen army. Despite halting their advance at the 878 Battle of Edington and King Alfred of Wessex claiming the title King of the Anglo-Saxons, the Viking settlers remained in their conquered territories, with Alfred's territories being that of Wessex as well as western Mercia. Alfred sought to make peace with the Scandinavian startup kingdoms known as the Danelaw, ordering his former foe Guthrum, the Viking king of East Anglia, to be baptized and kept cordial relations. Conquest would come instead under the reign of his son, Edward. Edward was born sometime in the mid-870s, the eldest son of Alfred and his wife Elswith. Raised up within the court, he was taught how to read English and was educated by tutors. Being the eldest son of the king, Edward possessed a strong claim to the throne as an Aetheling, however this was disputed by his cousins. 3 of Alfred's brothers had reigned prior to him, but their infant sons were overlooked in the succession due to their age, allowing for Alfred's succession. These sons grew up during the reign of their uncle, possessing their own claims to the kingdom, with Aethelwald, son of the former king Aethelred, becoming a fierce rival for the eventual succession of the kingdom. As he grew up, Edward was granted greater responsibilities, including leading an army to victory over invading Vikings in the 892 Battle of Farnham. Around this time, he also married his first wife, Ecgwin, who would give birth to his son Aethelstan, as well as a daughter. Ecgwin would die before the end of the decade, however, as Edward married his second wife, Aethelflaed, around 899. With the passing of Alfred in 899, the succession crisis finally boiled over. Alfred had aided the cause of his son by granting him a large amount of estates in his will, and he was able to succeed to the throne as king. Aethelwald first attempted to seize power by taking the estate at Wimborne, but fled once Edward arrived with an army. Around this time, he also seized a woman from a nunnery and married her, which has been described as potentially being another defiant move against his alleged usurpers, marrying someone he perhaps had been previously denied. Fleeing to the Danelaw, he was elected as King of York. Entering into alliance with the Danish East Anglians, he led a raid into Edward's territory. Edward responded with a raid of his own into East Anglia, however the army split once Edward decided to go back home. The Kentish contingent refused to leave, and they were attacked by Aethelwald in the 902 Battle of the Holm. During the battle, Aethelwald was slain, securing Edward's reign. Following this victory over the Danish, a treaty was made at Ytingaford, which set the border along Watling Street and the River Lea, and there were no recorded battles for several years. This peace ended in 909 with an invasion into Northumbria by Edward and Aethelred, subject king of Mercia, during which the bones of St. Oswald were taken out and relocated to the newly built St. Oswald's Priory. The Danish responded with a counter-raid, however it was decisively crushed at the Battle of Tettenhall on the 5th of August, 910. Defeat of the Vikings effectively subdued the Northumbrian Danes, allowing Edward to go on the offensive to the south without fear of northern incursions. He also managed to secure the direct governance of Oxford and London, which had been granted by Alfred to Aethelred after the latter's passing in 911. The strategy via which Edward would be able to conquer the southern Danes would be through the construction of fortresses known as burhs, which would be manned by a military force. These burhs allowed for a place for the people to rally and defend against raids and attacks, allowing for further permanent encroachments into Danish-held territory. Many chose instead to submit, with Danish lords bowing down and submitting to the English king in return for peace. This steady encroachment could not be stopped by the Danish, and Edward was able to conquer up to the River Welland by 918. In that year, his efforts were temporarily turned towards Mercia. Following the death of their ruler Ethelred, his wife and Edward's sister, Aethelflaed, succeeded as Lady of the Mercians, ruling de facto independently as an ally of her younger brother, starting her own campaign of burh construction against the Danes. In 918, however, Aethelflaed passed, allowing Edward to subdue the Mercians, despite an attempt to make her daughter Aelfwine ruler. During this distraction, the Danes in York were able to rally around a man named Ragnall, a Viking leader in Ireland, who became King of York in 918. Rather than continue his conquest, Edward chose to make peace in 920. This year saw a great gathering at Bakewell according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, where the kings of York, Scotland, and Strathclyde, as well as the Reeve of Bamberg, met with Edward and submitted to him. The fact that the Chronicle is the only source for this happening has caused skepticism from some historians, however, who hold that the meeting was probably just one of a treaty between neighboring kings. Whatever the case, the meeting highlights Edward's status as the most powerful king in Great Britain, taking the chief position in diplomacy amongst the rulers of the island. The alleged submission of Scotland would also be used by the 13th century king Edward I as justification for his own supremacy over Scotland. The final years of Edward's life are relatively sparse in information. He married for a third and final time in 919 to Eadgifu, the daughter of the alderman of Kent, Sieghelm. This marriage would produce 3 more children for a total of 14, including his son Edmund, who would succeed to the throne in 939 after his brother Aethelstan. The last major act of Edward's reign was the putting down of a Welsh and Mercian uprising in Chester in the year 923. He passed on July 17th in the following year, and the kingdom passed to his son Aethelstan. Aethelstan had been raised in Mercia and was thus not trusted by the Wessex elites, who chose instead to favor his younger half-brother Alfred. This attempt came to nothing when Alfred died roughly a month after Edward, however, allowing for Aethelstan's succession. Despite playing a large role in the unification of England, King Edward is often overshadowed by the heroic defense of his father, the official unification under his son, and even by the unique career of his sister. Still, Edward played a pivotal role in the creation of England. Edward's reign was one of, according to William of Malmesbury, perpetual battles in which he was always successful, allowing for the reconquest of the southern Danelaw and setting the stage for the death blow which would come under his son. The widespread creation of burhs revolutionized warfare in England, strengthening the region from future attacks, allowing for the advancement of war beyond minor raids.